I look out the living room window and see the gray sky of Fort Wayne, which seems to reflect my mood over the past few months. 6 months ago, I sold my parents' house on Coliseum Boulevard, where I had lived for 43 years with my late husband Ralph. At the time, it seemed sensible to move in with David and his wife Haley. After all, the house was too big for a 70-year-old woman living alone, and here, as my son promised, we would have a real family. Now I realize how wrong I was. Rosalind, you left the bathroom faucet running again. Haley's voice calls from the hallway. She doesn't call me Mom, even though we've known each other for 5 years. She always calls me by my first name, and always with that particular intonation, as if my presence here is a temporary nuisance that must be endured. I checked twice, I reply, without turning my head away from the window. The tap was turned off. Haley enters the living room, adjusting her blonde hair. She is 31 years old and works as an administrator at Dr. Miller's dental clinic. She has a beautiful face, but her eyes are always cold, especially when she looks at me. She wears expensive clothes, even though their family budget can barely afford such expenses, and this has always been a source of tension between her and David. Maybe you thought you were checking, she says, crossing her arms over her chest. But I heard water dripping all night. I finally turned to her. Haley is standing in the doorway of her bedroom, David's former room, where he lived before he got married. They took the best room in the house, with large windows and its own bathroom, while I got a small room at the end of the hall that used to be a study. I worked as a nanny in a nursery for 42 years, I say calmly. I know how to keep things in order. That was a long time ago, Haley replies. People get older, their memory deteriorates. That's normal. She says these words with such condescending kindness that I want to get up and go anywhere, just so I don't have to hear that tone. But I have nowhere to go. I gave the money from the sale of the house to David so he could pay off the loan on his pickup truck and pay for the wedding. It seemed like the right thing to do at the time. My son deserved a happy marriage and stability. Where's David? I ask. He left for work at 6 this morning, Haley says, picking up the TV remote from the coffee table. They have a big order to assemble furniture for a new shopping center. He'll be late. David works as a furniture assembler for a large chain of stores called Furniture Plus. He got the job right after high school, planning to work for a couple of years and then go to college. But the years passed, he got married, and now he's 34 and still assembling tables and cabinets for other people. Not that there's anything wrong with that job, but I know he dreamed of more. He used to want to be an engineer or an architect. Maybe you should talk to him about going back to school, I suggest. He's smart. He could. Rosalind? Haley turns on the TV, the sound drowning out my words. We don't need advice on how to live our lives. We're adults. I fall silent. Over the past few months, I've learned that any suggestions or comments I make are taken as interference. Haley has a way of making even the most innocent words sound like criticism or an attempt to control. And the most painful thing is that David always takes her side. The morning news is on the TV. The anchor is talking about new jobs in Fort Wayne and plans to develop the city's infrastructure. I listen half-heartedly, thinking about how my life has changed over the past few months. I used to have my own space, my own rules, my own rhythm. I woke up when I wanted, ate whatever I liked for breakfast, could invite friends over or just sit in the garden with a book. Now I walk around this house like a guest who has stayed longer than she should have. Haley has established her own rules here. Breakfast is strictly at 7 in the morning. She chooses what to watch on TV, and it's better not to invite guests because it causes inconvenience. I had to pack the things I brought from my parents' house into boxes and put them in the garage. Haley said that the old furniture didn't fit in with the interior. I'm going to the store, I say, getting up from the couch. I need to buy food for dinner. Don't buy anything extra, Haley replies, without looking up from the screen. We have a limited budget, and we can't spend money on your whims. My whims. That's what she calls the fruit I buy, or quality tea instead of cheap tea bags. I've been saving money for years to put aside for David, working in a kindergarten even after the official retirement age to increase my savings. And now they're telling me about a limited budget. I put on my coat and go outside. The October air is cool and the leaves on the trees have already started to turn yellow. I walk along the familiar streets of the neighborhood where I grew up and where I have lived most of my life. Neighbors nod to me in greeting. Some stop to chat. Mrs. Walters, who lives across the street from David's house, asks how I'm getting along with the young people. Wonderful, I reply, smiling. David is a good son. And it's true, David is a good son, but he's weak-willed. He's always been that way, even as a child. He would rather remain silent than argue, rather give in than insist on his own way. This trait helped him avoid conflict at school, but now it works against him. Haley quickly figured out how to control him, and now she makes all the important decisions in the house. At the store, I buy the bare essentials: chicken, rice, vegetables for salad. I try to choose the cheapest options, even though I've been used to buying quality products for years. I'm standing in line at the checkout behind a woman with 3 children who are noisy and demanding candy. The woman looks tired, but patiently explains to them that they will have sweets after dinner. I think about how I raised David. Maybe I was too soft on him. Maybe I should have taught him to stand up for himself more. But at the time, it seemed important to me that he grow up to be kind and easygoing. Ralph, his father, was stricter, but he died when David was 23. Since then, I have been my son's only support, and now I feel this bond gradually breaking down under Haley's influence. Returning home, I see David's pickup truck in the garage. That means he got home from work earlier than usual. I walk into the house and hear their voices coming from the bedroom. They're talking quietly, but I can hear the discontent in Haley's voice. Your mother bought a bunch of junk at the store again, she says. Look at the receipt, $43 for groceries for one dinner. Haley, that's a normal amount, David replies wearily. Besides, she's cooking for all of us. She's cooking because she has nothing else to do. Haley's voice becomes sharper. And we're paying for it out of our own pockets. David, I'm tired of this situation. I stand in the hallway, holding the grocery bags, and realize that they haven't even noticed I'm back. I want to go into their room and tell them that I heard every word, that I'm not a burden, but a person who gave them all my savings. But instead, I go to the kitchen and start making dinner. Half an hour later, David comes out of the bedroom. He looks tired after a day at work, his work clothes stained with furniture varnish. He comes up to me while I'm cutting vegetables and kisses me on the cheek. Hi, Mom, he says. How are you? Fine, I reply, without looking up from the cutting board. Dinner will be ready in 20 minutes. David pours himself some water and sits down at the kitchen table. He looks like his father, tall, with dark hair and kind brown eyes. But lately, I've been seeing more and more fatigue and a kind of hopelessness in those eyes. How's work? I ask. Fine, he shrugs. We're assembling furniture for a new electronics store. It's monotonous work, but they pay regularly. I remember how, as a child, he built complex structures from construction set pieces, drew house plans, and dreamed of becoming an architect. But life turned out differently. After school, he had to earn money. Then Haley came along with her needs and ambitions, and the time for dreams was over. Haley comes out of the bedroom in her bathrobe, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. She sits down next to David and puts her hand on his shoulder. Honey, I've been thinking about our plans for the weekend, she says. My sister is inviting us to a barbecue. Her friends will be there, so we can meet new people. Sounds good, David replies. Of course, it's just the two of us, Haley adds, glancing quickly at me. Rosalind will probably be bored with the young people. I continue stirring the rice in the pan, pretending not to have heard her words. But inside, I feel hurt. I'm 70 years old, but I'm not an ancient wreck. I have friends, interests, and I can hold a conversation on any topic. But Haley is gradually isolating me from their social life, making me feel like I'm not welcome wherever they go together. Dinner is mostly silent. David talks about work, Haley about some problems at the clinic. I listen, sometimes ask questions, but feel like a spectator in a theater watching someone else's life. After dinner, Haley goes to watch TV, and David helps me clear the table. Mom, he says quietly when we are alone in the kitchen, do you mind if we spend the weekend apart? Haley needs to relax. She's stressed at work. Of course, I reply. I'll find something to do. He hugs me, and for a second it feels like it used to, when we were just mother and son, without outside influences. But then he pulls away and goes to Haley, leaving me alone with the wet dishes and thoughts of how quickly life can change. 2 more weeks pass, and the atmosphere in the house becomes increasingly tense. I wake up every morning feeling like I'm walking through a minefield where any careless word or action could explode into a scandal. Haley no longer hides her irritation at my presence, and every day brings new complaints. This morning, I get up at 6:30, as usual, and go to the kitchen to make breakfast. After years of working in a kindergarten, I got used to getting up early, and the habit has stayed with me. I turn on the coffee maker, take the eggs out of the fridge, and slice some bread for toast. I like this time of the morning when the house is still asleep and I can be alone with my thoughts. But 10 minutes later, Haley walks into the kitchen in a silk robe, her hair tousled, her face unhappy. Rosalind, you're making noise again early in the morning, she says, yawning. Can't you make breakfast more quietly? I look around the kitchen, trying to figure out what could have woken her up. The coffee maker is almost silent, and I haven't turned on any electrical appliances except the toaster. I'm sorry, I tried not to make any noise, I reply. You tried, Haley repeats sarcastically, but you're not very good at it. I work until 7 in the evening at the clinic. I need a good night's sleep. And you've been stomping around here since 6 in the morning like a bull in a china shop. A bull in a china shop. I press my lips together and continue making breakfast. Over the past few weeks, Haley has become increasingly inventive in her insults. She never says anything overtly rude, but she knows how to choose her words so that they hurt. Maybe I'll have breakfast later, I suggest. Maybe you should reconsider your daily routine, Haley replies, pouring herself some coffee. You live here as if it were your home, but this is our home, David's and mine. I put the pan on the stove and crack the eggs. Haley is right about one thing. It really is their home. When David bought it 3 years ago, he took out a mortgage in his name. I only helped with the down payment, giving him some of the money from the sale of my parents' house. But at the time, I thought I was helping my son build a family nest where there would be a place for me, too. Haley, what's wrong? David enters the kitchen buttoning his shirt. He looks concerned, apparently having heard raised voices. Nothing special, Haley replies, sitting down at the table. Just discussing everyday issues with your mother. David looks at me questioningly, but I just shrug. Over the past few months, I've realized that complaining to him is useless. Haley always manages to make it seem like the problem is with me, and she's just trying to find a reasonable solution. Mom made breakfast, David says, sitting down next to his wife. Thanks, Mom. Yes, that's very nice of her, Haley agrees. It's just a shame that she starts cooking at 6 in the morning and wakes up the whole house. David frowns at me. Mom, maybe we really should have breakfast later. Haley works hard. She needs a break. And so it begins. David is increasingly taking his wife's side without even finding out the details of the situation. He automatically assumes she's right and sees my explanations as attempts to justify myself. Sure, I say, I'll have breakfast later. Breakfast is spent in an uncomfortable silence. Haley flips through a magazine. David checks his phone. I eat my eggs and think about how our relationship has changed. Breakfast with David used to be a time for conversation, plans for the day, simple communication. Now every meal turns into a test of survival. After breakfast, David leaves for work, and I am left alone with Haley. She goes to take a shower, and I clean up the dishes and get ready for my work day. Yes, I still work. A week after moving in with my son, I got a job as a nanny at a private kindergarten, which is a 10-minute bus ride away. The pay is low, but I need to feel useful, and working with children has always brought me joy. At the kindergarten, I am known as Miss Rose. The children cling to my skirt, tell me their secrets, and ask me to read them fairy tales. Here I feel needed and important. 4-year-old Amelia shows me a drawing of her family, where I am depicted next to her parents and labeled my second grandmother. 5-year-old Lucas brings me wildflowers he picked on his way to kindergarten. Miss Rosa, are you sad today? Amelia asks me during her afternoon nap. No, dear, I reply, adjusting her blanket. Just a little tired. My mom gets tired too, the girl says seriously. But my dad gives her a foot massage, and she feels better. Does anyone give you a massage? The innocent child's question makes me smile. Children see the world so simply and clearly. For them, the solution to any problem is obvious. If you're sad, you need a hug. If you're tired, you need to rest. If you're in pain, you need to get treatment. I return home at 5 in the evening and see that Haley is already home. She is sitting in the living room, talking on the phone with her friend Rachel. She is speaking loudly enough for me to hear every word. Yes, can you believe she's been living with us for 6 months now? Haley says. Of course, David can't kick his own mother out. He's too kind. But honestly, it's becoming unbearable. I freeze in the hallway, taking off my coat. Haley continues. She sticks her nose into everything, gives unsolicited advice, and her habit of getting up early and making noise in the kitchen. Plus, she takes the best room in the house. Rachel, do you realize how unfair that is? A young family needs space to develop their relationship. The best room in the house. I live in a small room at the end of the hallway, which barely fits a single bed and a small dresser. I don't even have my own bathroom. I use the shared toilet in the hallway. And the best room is David and Haley's bedroom with large windows, a spacious walk-in closet, and its own bathroom. You know what she said to me today? Haley continues. That I should talk to David about going back to school. Can you believe the nerve? As if she knows better than us what's best for our family. But I did say it. Last night when David was complaining about the monotony of his job and how tired he was of the same old tasks, it seemed to me that he was ready for a change, that my suggestion would help him remember his forgotten dreams. Of course, David is too polite to say anything directly to his mother. Haley's voice becomes quieter, but I can still hear every word. But I can see how tense he is at home. A man needs to feel like the head of the family, not a mama's boy. Mama's boy. Those words hit a sore spot because there is some truth to them. I was really close to David after his father died. We went through grief together and made plans for the future together. But I never tried to control his life or interfere with his independence. I was just there when he needed support. Listen, I have to go. David will be back from work soon. Haley concludes the conversation. Yes, let's definitely meet up this weekend. Bye. She ends the conversation and turns to me. There is not a trace of embarrassment on her face that I heard the entire conversation. On the contrary, I see something like satisfaction in her eyes. Rosalind, you're just in time, she says. We need to talk. I walk into the living room and sit down in the armchair opposite the sofa where Haley is sitting. She looks determined, like someone who is prepared for an important conversation. I think it's time to discuss our living situation openly, she begins. The three of us have been living together for 6 months now, and it's creating certain complications. What kind of complications? I ask. David and I are a young family. We need our personal space, Haley explains. When a third person lives in the house, especially someone from the older generation, it affects the dynamics of the relationship. The older generation? She talks about me as if I were an ancient relic that needs to be carefully stored away in a museum. In addition, Haley continues, there are financial issues, utility bills, groceries, household expenses. All of this increases when there is an extra person living in the house. I pay my share of the expenses, I object, and I buy groceries and cook for everyone. Yes, but that's not enough. Haley shakes her head. Your pension and nanny salary only cover part of the actual costs. David and I are essentially subsidizing your living here. Subsidizing? What a cold bureaucratic word to describe family relationships. But Haley is right that my contribution to the family budget is indeed small. My pension is $900 a month, and my salary at the daycare center adds another $400. That's enough for my personal needs and part of the shared expenses, but nothing more. What do you suggest? I ask. I suggest finding a more suitable solution for everyone, Haley replies. There are wonderful nursing homes in Fort Wayne where you can socialize with people your age and participate in programs for seniors. A nursing home. I look at Haley and realize that this is not a spontaneous suggestion. She has been thinking about this idea, perhaps even researching options. What does David think about it? I ask. David wants what's best for everyone, Haley replies evasively. He understands that the current situation cannot go on forever. At that moment, we hear the front door open. David is back from work. Haley quickly gets up from the sofa and goes to greet him, leaving me alone with my thoughts about the nursing home and how far our relationship has come. Hi, honey, I hear Haley's voice from the hallway. How was work? Tired, David replies. We were assembling office furniture for a new bank today. Heavy desks, a lot of work. They walk into the living room, and David kisses me on the cheek as usual, but I notice that he looks tense. Haley sits down next to him on the sofa and puts her hand on his knee. David, your mother and I were discussing our living situation, she says softly. I think it's time to have an honest conversation about the future. David looks at me, then at his wife. What exactly? The fact that we all need more space and independence, Haley replies. Your mother is a wonderful woman, but a young family needs to develop without outside influence. Outside influence. Now I've become an outsider in my own son's life. Haley's right, Mom, David says after a pause. We really need to think about a more long-term solution. You can't live here forever. These words hurt me more than all of Haley's complaints put together, because they come from my son, the person for whom I gave up all my savings and moved into this house. I understand, I say quietly. I'll think about your suggestions. The rest of the evening passes in a heavy atmosphere. We hardly talk during dinner. David talks about his work plans for tomorrow. Haley mentions meeting her friends over the weekend. I eat silently and think about how my life in this house is coming to an end. The week passes in tense anticipation. After our conversation about the nursing home, Haley is deliberately polite but cold, as if I have already made the decision to leave and she is just waiting for me to do so. David avoids serious conversations, immersing himself in work and television, clearly hoping that the problem will resolve itself without his active involvement. I continue to work at the nursery, cook dinner, and clean the house, but I feel like a ghost living out my last days in a place where I am no longer wanted. In the evenings, I lie in my small room and think about my options. A nursing home seems like a premature punishment for old age, which has not yet arrived. I am active, I work, I can take care of myself. But a rented apartment on my salary and pension is a tiny studio in a rough neighborhood. On Friday evening, the situation reaches a critical point. David is delayed at work because of an urgent order, and Haley comes home in a bad mood. There were problems with the computer system at the clinic. Patients complained about delays, and Dr. Miller was particularly demanding of the staff. Rosalind, we need to talk, Haley says, without even saying hello. She throws her purse on the sofa and turns to me with a determined look. Of course, I reply, putting down the book I was reading. I've been thinking about our conversation all week, Haley begins, pacing around the living room. And I've come to the conclusion that we've been putting off a decision for too long. The situation needs to change immediately. The word immediately sounds like a sentence. I see in Haley's eyes the same determination she once had when she got David to propose, insisted on buying this house, and convinced him to spend money on an expensive wedding. What exactly do you mean? I ask. I mean that by the end of the month, you need to find another place to live, Haley replies bluntly. I can't tolerate this situation anymore. I'm having a nervous breakdown because of the constant stress at home. A nervous breakdown. Haley tends to be dramatic, but now there really is a note of despair in her voice. Haley, I understand that you're uncomfortable, I say cautiously. But can't we find a compromise? Maybe change some of our habits, redistribute responsibilities. No, Haley shakes her head sharply. Compromises don't work. We tried that for 6 months and nothing changed. The problem isn't habits or responsibilities. The problem is that this house is too small for 3 adults. She sits down in the chair across from me, crosses her arms over her chest, and looks me straight in the eye. Rosalind, I'm going to be blunt. David won't bring himself to tell you this because he's too kind. But I will. Our marriage is suffering because of your presence here. My marriage is suffering? I repeat. Yes, it is, Haley confirms. We can't communicate normally, plan for the future, or just be spouses when there's a third person in the house all the time, especially when that person is the mother of one of the spouses who thinks she has the right to interfere in our affairs. I don't interfere, I object. I just live here and try to help with the housework. You do interfere, Haley insists. Your advice about David's career, your comments about our spending, your constant presence in the kitchen when we want to talk alone, all of that is interference. I try to remember specific instances when my words or actions might have seemed inappropriate. Yes, I have sometimes expressed the opinion that David should consider changing jobs or pursuing further education. Yes, I have noticed when they spent money on things that seemed unnecessary to me. But isn't that natural for someone who cares about the well-being of their family? Haley, I don't want to interfere in your marriage. I say sincerely, if you tell me specifically what's bothering you, I'll try to change it. Your presence itself bothers me, Haley replies harshly, and I'm not going to put up with it anymore. At that moment, we hear the front door open. David is home. Haley gets up from the chair and goes to meet him, while I remain in the living room, trying to digest what I've heard. Hi, honey. I hear Haley's voice. How are you? You look tired. It's been a tough day, David replies. I had to redo half the order because of measurement errors. I was delayed by 3 hours. They walk into the living room, and I can see that David really does look exhausted. His work clothes are dusty, he has dark circles under his eyes, and his movements are sluggish. David, sit down. We need to talk, Haley says in a serious tone. David looks at her warily, then at me. He can probably sense the tension in the air. About what? About our family situation, Haley replies. I just explained to your mother that we need a change, a radical change. David sits down heavily on the sofa and rubs his face with his hands. Haley, maybe we can postpone this conversation? I'm very tired. No, we can't. Haley shakes her head. We've put it off for too long. David, I'm giving you an ultimatum. Either your mother finds another place to live by the end of the month, or I'm filing for divorce. The word divorce hangs in the air like a thunderclap. David raises his head sharply and looks at his wife in amazement. Haley, are you serious? Absolutely, she confirms. I can't live like this anymore. It's ruining my health and our relationship. David looks at me, and I see confusion and pain in his eyes. He is torn between his wife and his mother, between the present and the past, between love and duty. Mom, he says quietly, what do you think about this? I think that every person has the right to be happy in their own home, I reply cautiously. If my presence is getting in the way of your happiness, we need to find a solution. A solution has already been found, Haley interjects. Rosalind is moving out. It's just a matter of timing. Where am I supposed to move to? I ask. With my salary and pension, I can only afford very modest housing, and I'll need time to find a suitable option. That's your problem, Haley replies coldly. You're a grown woman. You have to take care of yourself. These words sound especially cruel, considering that I was the one who gave my savings to set up this family. But I don't mention that. Reproaches and complaints will only make the situation worse right now. Haley, maybe you're being too harsh, David says cautiously. Mom really helps us around the house, cooking, cleaning. Helps? Haley turns to her husband indignantly. David, you don't understand what's going on. Your mother isn't a helper. She's a freeloader. She lives off our money, eats our food, uses our utilities. And in exchange for what? Cooking and cleaning? We can handle that ourselves. Freeloader. That word stings worse than a slap in the face. I've worked my whole life, supported my family, saved every dollar, and now I'm being called a freeloader. Besides, Haley continues, your mother's constant presence is affecting you. You're acting like a mama's boy, not an independent man. How can you be the head of the family if your mom is always around, ready to give advice or solve problems? Mama's boy. Haley hits David where it hurts most, his self-esteem as a man. He has always been sensitive to hints about his dependence. I'm not a mama's boy, David objects, but there is no confidence in his voice. Prove it, Haley challenges him. Do something manly. Choose between your wife and your mother. An awkward silence hangs in the air. David sits with his head down, his hands clenched into fists. Haley stands nearby, arms crossed over her chest, waiting for his decision. And I realize that the outcome of this conversation is a foregone conclusion. Haley has studied her husband's weaknesses too well. Mom, David finally says, without looking up, maybe Haley is right. Maybe it will be better for all of us if you find your own place. Your own place, I repeat. I see. David, you have to say it directly, Haley insists. Tell your mother clearly and unequivocally what you want. David looks up at me. I see pain in his eyes, but also the determination of a man who has made a choice. Mom, I want you to move out, he says slowly, by the end of next week. I'm sorry, but it's necessary for my marriage. By the end of next week? I ask. That's very little time. It's enough, Haley interjects. You can find a room or a place in a nursing home in a week. Haley, I turn to her, do you realize that I gave you all my savings? The money from the sale of the house went to your mortgage and wedding. I don't have the financial cushion to move. It was your decision, Haley replies insensitively. No one forced you to give the money away. David, I say to my son. Be honest with me. Do you really think I'm a burden? David is silent for a few seconds, and I can see different emotions fighting in his face. Then he jumps up from the sofa. Yes, Mom, he explodes. You're a burden. I don't need a poor mother who hangs around my neck and prevents me from building my own life. These words fall on me like an ice-cold shower. I don't need a poor mother. The son I raised, to whom I gave all the best years of my life, all my love and care, calls me a poor burden. I understand, I say quietly, getting up from the chair. Now everything is clear. I go to my room, and behind me, I hear Haley say to David, You see, it's not so bad. Now you're a free man, the head of your own family. I close the door to my room and sit down on the bed. My hands are shaking. My heart is beating so hard that it feels like it's about to jump out of my chest. Around me are boxes with my belongings, which have not been unpacked in 6 months. Now I understand why. Subconsciously, I felt that this was a temporary shelter. I can hear the muffled voices of David and Haley behind the wall. They are discussing the details of my eviction, talking about how to use the vacated room. Haley suggests turning it into a study or a guest bedroom for her parents. I take a notebook and pen out of the bedside table and start to make a plan of action. By the end of the week, I need to find a place to live, organize the move, and possibly change jobs if the new place is far from the nursery. The task seems impossible, but I have no choice. An hour later, silence returns to the house. David and Haley have gone to bed, and I sit by the light of a table lamp, reviewing my life. 70 years old, a rented room, a nanny's salary, and a small pension. Not a very bright outlook for starting a new chapter in life, but the worst thing is not the financial difficulties. The worst thing is the realization that my son rejected me in order to save his marriage, that the words beggar mother were not spoken in a fit of anger, but as a hard-won conviction, that 34 years of my boundless love and care were not enough for him to stand up for me at a critical moment. I turn off the lamp and lie down in the dark, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow, a new life will begin. The life of a woman who is no longer needed by anyone. But I don't know that yet. For now, I'm just trying to fall asleep in a house where no one is waiting for me anymore. The week flies by in a fog. I wake up every day with a feeling of unreality, but the to-do list in my notebook reminds me of the harsh reality. Finding a place to live, gathering documents, packing my things. David and Haley are acting overly polite, as if I were a sick relative who needs to be carefully moved to another place. On Monday, I take a day off from the nursery and go looking for an apartment. There are many ads in the newspaper, but most of the options are either too expensive or located in areas where I wouldn't dare go even during the day. By the end of the day, I have only one real option left, a one-room apartment in an old building on South Lafayette Street. The building was built in the 1960s and looks the part. Peeling paint on the walls, creaky wooden steps, the smell of dampness in the stairwell. The apartment is on the third floor with no elevator. The room is small, with one window overlooking the courtyard where the trash cans are. The kitchen is the size of a storage room, and the bathroom is combined with the toilet. But the price is right, $450 a month plus utilities. The deposit is equal to 1 month's rent, explains the landlord, a man of about 45 with an unshaven face and indifferent eyes. The first month's rent is due in advance. That comes to a total of $900 upon moving in. $900 is almost my entire monthly pension. I have a small savings account, about $2,000, which I have been putting aside for unexpected expenses. Now that money will go toward the move. When can I move in? I ask. Tomorrow, if you like, replies the landlord. The previous tenants moved out last week. I sign the lease, hand over the money, and receive the keys. Now I have my own place. It's modest and uncomfortable, but it's mine. On Tuesday, I inform the daycare center that I need to change my work schedule because of the move. The director, Mrs. Clark, expresses her regret about my circumstances, but she is accommodating and allows me to work only 3 days a week. This means less money, but more flexibility. Wednesday and Thursday are spent packing and organizing the move. David helps me carry the boxes to the car, but we hardly speak. Haley ostentatiously goes about her business, offering no help. When I say goodbye to them on Friday evening, she shakes my hand like a business partner. "Good luck, Rosalind," she says dryly. "I hope you find happiness." David hugs me awkwardly, like a schoolboy forced to apologize. "Mom, if you need anything," he begins, but doesn't finish the sentence. "Thank you, son," I reply. "Take care of yourself and Haley." I drive to my new apartment with 2 suitcases and a box of essentials. David promised to bring the rest tomorrow. I go up to the 3rd floor, unlock the door, and find myself in an empty room with bare walls. I turn on the light. One of the 3 bulbs in the ceiling chandelier works. I turn on the tap in the bathroom. There is water, but it's rusty. I spend my first night in my new home on an inflatable mattress, covered with a blanket. Outside the window, traffic roars from South Lafayette Street. Dogs bark somewhere. Loud music plays. I lie in the dark and think about how radically my life has changed in one week. The next 3 weeks are spent trying to settle into my new life. I buy secondhand furniture at a consignment store: a bed, a table, 2 chairs, a small refrigerator. I tidy up the apartment, wash the windows, and put up new wallpaper in the bedroom. Working at the kindergarten helps me maintain a sense of normality. The children haven't changed. They are still happy when I arrive and sad when I leave. Gradually, I get used to being alone. Morning coffee alone, evening walks around the neighborhood, reading before bed without having to adjust to someone else's schedule. There is something liberating about this independence, although at times the silence of the apartment seems oppressive. David calls me twice a month. The first time is to check in and see if everything is okay with the apartment. The second time is to wish me a happy birthday. I am turning 71, and I celebrate this date with dinner at a Chinese restaurant near my home. I sit at a table alone, eating chicken in sweet and sour sauce, and think about how last year David baked me a cake, and Haley gave me a beautiful scarf. "Mom, how are you?" David asks on the phone. "Aren't you too lonely?" "Everything's fine," I reply. "I'm working, reading, going to the library." "Maybe you could come visit us?" he suggests uncertainly. "We'll see," I reply evasively. I have a lot to do right now. In reality, I don't have anything special to do, but I'm not ready to return to the house where I was called a useless burden. In early November, exactly 1 month after the move, something unexpected happens in my life. I come home from work and find an official letter in my mailbox from Harrison and Partners, a notary office in Indianapolis. I go up to my apartment and open the envelope with trembling hands. "Dear Mrs. Stevenson, we are writing to inform you that you must come to our office to settle the estate left behind after the death of your sister, Victoria Stevenson Hughes. Please contact us within 10 days to schedule an appointment." Victoria, my younger sister, with whom I had not communicated for more than 15 years. The last time we saw each other was at our mother's funeral in 2008, and then we had an unpleasant conversation about the inheritance. Victoria believed that our parents' house should be sold and the money divided equally. I insisted on staying in the house with Ralph. We had a falling out and never spoke again. Victoria moved to California when she was young and married a businessman named Hughes. They didn't have any children. I knew she was involved in some kind of business, but I wasn't interested in the details. Our lives had drifted so far apart that we had become strangers. The next day, I call the notary's office and make an appointment for Monday. All week long, I think about what this inheritance might mean. Victoria lived far away and never showed me any particular affection. Perhaps it was some family heirlooms or a small amount of money. On Monday morning, I took the bus to Indianapolis. The notary office was located in the city center in a modern office building. Mr. Harrison turns out to be a man in his 50s, wearing an expensive suit and a professional smile. Mrs. Stevenson, first of all, please accept my condolences, he says, seating me in a leather chair across from his desk. Your sister passed away a month ago from a heart attack. The funeral has already taken place in Los Angeles. A month ago, Victoria died at the same time I was moving into my new apartment. A strange coincidence. According to the will, the notary continues, opening a folder of documents, Mrs. Hughes leaves you all her property. This includes real estate in California, stocks and bonds, bank accounts, and the business she owned. The entire business? I ask. What about her husband? Mr. Hughes passed away 3 years ago, the notary explains. They had no children and no other close relatives. You are the sole heir. He hands me a document with a list of assets. I read it and my head spins. A house in Malibu worth $2 million, shares in various companies worth $4 million, bank accounts with a total balance of $1.5 million, and most importantly, the organic cosmetics company Natural Beauty, valued at $8 million. The total value of the inheritance is approximately $15.5 million, the notary says calmly, as if he were talking about $15. I sit silently, unable to believe what I've heard. $15.5 million. Yesterday I was counting every dollar, and today I'm a multimillionaire. Is that, is that for sure? I ask. Absolutely sure, confirms the notary. Your sister was a very successful businesswoman. Her company supplies cosmetics throughout the country. She has a solid customer base and an excellent reputation. It turns out that Victoria wasn't just doing business, as I thought. She built a cosmetics empire, made millions, and lived in a luxurious house by the ocean. And all this time, I thought she was a spoiled sister who ran away to California for an easy life. What do I need to do to claim the inheritance? I ask. Sign the documents, go through the formalities with the tax service, explains the notary. The process will take several weeks, but I can already give you a certificate of inheritance for the banks. The next 2 hours are spent signing papers and discussing details. The notary recommends a financial advisor to help me manage my capital. He explains that a hired manager can run the company, and I will receive profits as the owner. By the way, he adds at the end of the meeting, your sister left a personal letter for you. He hands me a sealed envelope with my name written in Victoria's familiar handwriting. I put the letter in my purse without opening it. I spend the return trip to Fort Wayne on the bus in a state of shock. The familiar Indiana landscape flashes by outside the window, but my world has been turned upside down. Just this morning, I was a lonely pensioner with an income of $1,300 a month. Now I am richer than most people I know. At home, I make some tea and only then open Victoria's letter. The handwriting is the same, neat, with a slight slant to the right. Dear Rosa, if you are reading this letter, it means that I have died and you have become the heir to my fortune. I know you are surprised. We haven't been in touch for so long that you probably forgot I existed. But I always remembered you. Forgive me for our quarrel 15 years ago. I was foolish and selfish. I understand now that you wanted to keep the family home, and I was only thinking about money. You were always the better of the two of us. Kinder, more caring. You devoted yourself to your family, while I chased success. I am leaving you everything I have accumulated because I believe that you will use this money better than any charity organization. You know the value of hard work and honesty. Don't let anyone deceive you or take advantage of your kindness. You deserve better. With love, your sister Vicky. I reread the letter several times, and my eyes fill with tears. It turns out that Victoria remembered our quarrel and regretted it. It turns out that she followed my life from afar and appreciated my choice, even though she herself chose a different path. The next morning, I go to the bank and open a new account. The inheritance certificate allows me to access part of the funds right away. The bank clerk, looking at the numbers in the documents, changes his expression and begins to address me with special respect. The first thing I decide to do is buy a car, not because buses don't suit me, but because I want to feel my new independence. I go to the Prestige Motors car dealership in the north of the city, where they sell expensive cars. "What are you interested in?" asks the salesman, a young man in a fashionable suit. "A Rolls Royce," I reply simply. The salesman looks at me with doubt. I am dressed in an ordinary coat and simple shoes, looking like an ordinary pensioner. But when I show him my bank statement, his attitude changes instantly. "Of course, ma'am," he exclaims. "We have a beautiful Rolls-Royce Cullinan, manufactured in 2023. Would you like to see it?" The car is magnificent, black with a cream interior, as quiet as a whisper, as comfortable as the best armchair in the house. I buy it without haggling, pay cash, and arrange for the documents to be delivered to my home. I spend the next few days at driving school, refreshing my driving skills. I have a driver's license, but after years of living with Ralph, who always drove himself, I've lost the habit of driving. A week later, I am already driving confidently around Fort Wayne in my new Rolls Royce. The feeling of freedom is intoxicating. I can go anywhere, buy anything, live however I want. But most importantly, I am no longer dependent on anyone. On Friday evening, exactly 1 month after receiving my inheritance, I am driving down Coliseum Boulevard from the bank. The traffic light at the intersection with South Clinton turns red, and I stop. At that moment, David and Haley are walking down the sidewalk. They are talking about something, apparently returning from the store. Haley is carrying grocery bags. David is the first to notice my car. He stops dead in his tracks and nudges Haley's elbow, pointing to the Rolls Royce. Haley turns her head, her face expressing amazement. They both stare at the car, trying to figure out who could be driving such a luxurious vehicle in their modest neighborhood. I crack the tinted window and pretend to check the rearview mirror. David and Haley see my face and freeze with their mouths open. Haley drops the grocery bag and apples scatter across the sidewalk. The light turns green. I roll up the window and smoothly pull away, leaving them standing on the sidewalk with looks of complete bewilderment on their faces. In the rearview mirror, I see them turn their heads, watching my car drive away. I drive home and smile for the first time in many months. Life really can change overnight. Yesterday, I was called a poor mother. Today, I am hundreds of times richer than them. And this is just the beginning. The first thing I'm going to do is buy a house. Not because my apartment on South Lafayette is unbearable, although the noise from the street and the smell of dampness are really getting on my nerves. I just want to live in a place that is completely mine, where no one can tell me I'm not wanted. The realtor, an elegant woman named Cynthia Foster, shows me several options in prestigious areas of Fort Wayne. I settle on a house in the Ox Estate neighborhood, a 2-story colonial-style building with 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a spacious kitchen, and a living room with a fireplace, large windows, high ceilings, a well-kept garden with century-old oak trees. The price is $350,000, Cynthia informs me. The house was built in 1995, and all the utilities are in excellent condition. "I'll take it," I reply without haggling. Cynthia looks surprised. Apparently, clients usually take a long time to think about such a serious decision. But I don't have time for doubts. At 71, every day counts. We complete the transaction in a week. I pay in cash, which speeds up the process considerably. I move into my new home with the same 2 suitcases I left David's house with. I buy everything else new. I spend the next month settling in. I hire an interior designer, a young woman named Rachel, who helps me choose furniture, colors, and decor. I prefer a classic style, solid wood, natural fabrics, calm tones. Nothing flashy or ostentatious, just quality and comfort. In the master bedroom, I put a large bed with an orthopedic mattress, the first in many years where I can sleep without worrying about disturbing anyone by turning over or going to the bathroom. In the living room, I buy comfortable reading chairs, a good TV, and a stereo system. In the kitchen, I install new appliances, including the coffee machine I've been dreaming of for years. I pay special attention to the library, a room that I turn into my private study. Tall bookshelves from floor to ceiling, a large desk by the window, leather armchairs. I buy books that I've always wanted to read but never had the time or money for. Mrs. Stevenson, don't you need a housekeeper? Rachel asks during one of her visits. The house is big. It's hard to take care of it all by yourself. She's right. The house is really big compared to my old apartment. Besides, I now have the opportunity to hire help. Through a domestic staff agency, I find Martha Gonzalez, a 50-year-old woman with excellent references. She comes 3 times a week, cleans, does laundry, and sometimes cooks. Martha works quietly and efficiently, doesn't impose herself with conversation, but is always ready to listen if I want to talk. I also hire a gardener, Mr. Thompson, a retiree who keeps the grounds in perfect condition. He comes twice a week, mows the lawns, tends the flower beds, and prunes the trees. He is not just an employee. We often talk about plants, the weather, and life in general. Gradually, my house is turning into a real family home, which is what David's house would have been if things had turned out differently. But now I don't have to discuss the color of the walls or the choice of furniture with anyone. I don't have to justify my purchases or ask permission to invite guests. My first guests are my colleagues from the kindergarten. I invite them over for Sunday lunch, cook a roast turkey with vegetables, and buy some good wine. Mrs. Clark and 3 other teachers arrive with bouquets of flowers and wide eyes. "Rose, this is amazing!" exclaims Anna, a young teacher. "How did you manage to buy such a house?" "It was an inheritance from my sister," I explained simply. "She lived in California and was in business." The women look around the interior with interest, admiring the kitchen, the garden, and the library. Over lunch, we talk about work, children, and plans for the future. For the first time in a long time, I feel like a hostess who can afford to entertain friends in her own home. But the idyll does not last long. In early December, while shopping for groceries at the supermarket, I notice a familiar figure in the next aisle. David pretends to be choosing canned goods, but I see him glancing in my direction. This is no coincidence. Over the past 2 weeks, I have noticed his car several times near my house, near the bank, at the entrance to the shopping center. He is following me, trying to find out the source of my sudden wealth. "David," I address him directly, "why are you following me?" He flinches like a schoolboy caught misbehaving and turns to me with a guilty expression. "Mom, I wasn't following you," he stammers. "Just buying groceries." "At a supermarket that's 20 minutes away from your house," I remark dryly, "when there are 3 other stores nearby." David lowers his eyes and puts the grocery basket on the floor. "Mom, I need to talk to you," he says quietly. "Can we go outside?" We walk to the supermarket exit and stop by my Rolls Royce. David looks at the car as if he's seeing it for the first time, even though he's probably been watching it for weeks. "Where did you get the money for all this?" he asks bluntly. "An inheritance," I reply, "from Aunt Victoria." "Aunt Victoria?" David frowns. "You said you hadn't been in touch for years." "We weren't, but she included me in her will. How much? David insists. An interesting question from a man who called me a penniless burden a month ago. I look at my son and see in his eyes not joy for his mother, but greed and calculation. Enough to live comfortably, I reply evasively. Mom, I have a right to know. David objects. I'm your son, your only heir, your sole heir. How quickly he remembered his family ties when he smelled money. You're just now discovering your right to know? I ask. A month ago, you weren't interested in my finances when you kicked me out of the house. Mom, it was, David stammers, searching for the right words. It was a difficult situation. Haley was stressed. We were both tense. I see, I nod. So when you thought I had no money, I was a burden. And now that it turns out I have an inheritance, I'm your mother again. David blushes, realizing how transparent his motives are. It's not that simple, he mumbles. Haley didn't know about your inheritance. If she had known, then what? I interrupt. She wouldn't have asked me to move out? Maybe, David admits. Mom, maybe we can talk about this. Come to some kind of decision? What decision? I ask. Well, maybe you could come back home? We'll forget about that fight and start over. Haley will realize she was wrong. Haley will realize she was wrong. Not because she realizes how unfair she was, but because she finds out about the money. What if I didn't have the inheritance? I ask. Would you still suggest forgetting the fight? David is silent, and that silence is enough of an answer. Mom, let's be practical, he finally says. You have money, we have a house. We can help each other. Help each other. What a delicate way of saying outright begging. Thanks for the offer, I reply politely. I'll think about it. I get in the car and drive away, leaving David standing in the parking lot with a thoughtful look on his face. On the way home, I think about how quickly his attitude toward me has changed. A month ago, he was yelling that he didn't need a broke mother. Now he's willing to forget the quarrel for access to my money. A surprise awaits me at home. Haley is standing on the doorstep with a bouquet of flowers and a box of chocolates. She is wearing her best dress, her hair is neatly styled, and she has a forced smile on her face. Rosalind, I'm so glad you're home. May I come in? I really need to talk to you. I open the door and lead her into the living room. Haley looks around with poorly concealed amazement. Apparently, she expected to see modest furnishings, not an interior worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. What a beautiful house, she says, sitting down in an armchair. You must feel very comfortable here. Yes, thank you, I reply dryly. Would you like some tea? I'd love some. Haley nods. Rosalind, I came to apologize for what happened between us. Apologize? That's interesting. For what exactly? I ask, pouring tea into porcelain cups. For all the misunderstandings, Haley replies evasively. I was stressed out because of work. I wasn't feeling well. Maybe I was too harsh, too harsh. What a delicate way to describe months of humiliation and the final scene with the eviction. I see, I nod. David told me about your inheritance, Haley continues, sipping her tea. What wonderful news! You must be very happy. Yes, it's a surprise, I agree. Rosalind, I want to invite you back home with us. Haley leans forward, looking me in the eyes. We can rebuild our relationship, start over. I realize now that I was wrong. She realizes it now, after she found out about the money. That's very kind of you, I reply politely, but I've already settled in here. But you won't be so lonely in our house, Haley insists. We're a family. We need to stick together, especially now that we have new opportunities. New opportunities. She doesn't even try to hide her interest in my money. Besides, Haley adds, a big house like this requires a lot of maintenance costs. With us, You can save money and spend your inheritance on something more enjoyable. Like what? I ask. Well, travel, gifts for loved ones. Haley smiles. Help for a young family building their future. Help for a young family. So we've gotten to the point of the visit. Is David having financial difficulties? I ask. Not difficulties. Haley quickly corrects herself. We're just planning to expand. We want to buy a bigger house, maybe have children. But for that, we need a financial safety net. A financial safety net. 2 months ago, they kicked me out because, according to them, I was a financial burden. Now they want me to be their financial cushion. I see, I say. I'll think about your offer. Haley stays for another half hour talking about her plans for the future, about how we could help each other. When she finally leaves, I sit in my living room and think about how money changes people, or rather, how it reveals the true nature of people, which they usually hide. In the evening, David calls. Mom, Haley was at your place today, he says. She told me about your conversation. And what did she say? I ask. That you're willing to discuss reconciliation, David replies, hope in his voice. I said I'd think about it, I correct him. That's not the same thing. Mom, please, David's voice becomes pleading. We want to make amends for our mistakes. Haley sincerely regrets what happened. She truly does. After she found out about the $15 million. David, I say gently, answer me honestly. If I hadn't had the inheritance, would you have called me today? A long pause. Mom, why are you asking these questions? He finally replies evasively. Because it's important for me to understand people's motives, I explain, especially people who call themselves my family. After this conversation, I make my final decision. The inheritance changed not only my life, but also the attitude of those around me. Now I see their true colors, and the picture is not very pleasant. The week passes relatively calmly. I enjoy the quiet of my home, read, meet with friends from kindergarten, and plan a trip to California to get acquainted with the inherited business. David hasn't called since our last conversation, and I think he understands my unwillingness to resume the relationship on his terms. But on Saturday morning, as I'm having breakfast in the sunny kitchen, the doorbell rings. David and Haley are standing on the doorstep, both dressed up with guilty smiles. David is holding a large bouquet of white roses, and Haley is holding an expensive box of chocolates and a bottle of French champagne. Mom, we came to apologize, David says, handing me the flowers. To truly apologize. Rosalind, please hear us out. Haley adds, her voice pleading. We realize how awful we behaved. I look at them standing on my doorstep with gifts in their hands and feel a strange satisfaction. A month ago, they kicked me out like a beggar, and today they've come crawling back with apologies after learning of my wealth. Come in, I say coldly, stepping back from the door. They enter the hallway, and I see their eyes greedily scanning the interior. A crystal chandelier, marble floors, expensive paintings on the walls. Haley can't hide her envy as she looks around at surroundings that cost more than their annual income. What a beautiful house, David mutters, following me into the living room. Mom, you've created a real paradise here. Thank you, I replied dryly, sitting down in my favorite armchair. Have a seat. David and Haley sit down on the sofa next to each other, like a united front preparing for important negotiations. Haley puts the gifts on the coffee table and folds her hands in her lap like a model daughter. Mom, we've thought a lot about what happened between us. David begins in a serious tone, and we realized we made a huge mistake. What mistake? I ask, leaning back in my chair. We didn't appreciate you, David continues. We didn't understand how much you mean to us. We only thought about our own problems, not your feelings. Beautiful words. I wonder how long they spent rehearsing this speech. Rosalind, I want to personally apologize for my behavior. Haley interjects. I was a selfish and foolish woman. Instead of rejoicing in the presence of such a wonderful mother-in-law, I saw you as a hindrance. A wonderful mother-in-law. 2 months ago, she saw me as a freeloader and a burden. What changed? I ask bluntly. Why did you come now? We realized our mistake, David replies quickly. Time has shown how much we miss you. Time? I repeat ironically. Or the information about my inheritance? An awkward pause ensues. Haley nervously fixes her hair. David studies the pattern on the carpet. Mom, it's not about the money, David finally says, looking up. It's about family. About the fact that we lost the most precious person because of stupidity and misunderstanding. The most precious person? I repeat. Interesting. A month ago, I was a penniless mother who needed to be gotten rid of. Haley flinches at these words. Apparently, David told her about his outburst of anger on that fateful evening. Rosalind, David said that in the heat of the moment. She defends her husband. He didn't mean what he said. We were both stressed and couldn't control our words. Couldn't control your words, I nod. I see. And now you are in control of them? Now we say what we really feel, David assures me. Mom, we love you. We want you to be part of our family. They love me. How touching, especially considering that this love awakened at the same time as the news of the $15 million. Rosalind, we want to offer you something special, Haley says, leaning forward. Not just a return to the old house, but the creation of a new family dynamic. What kind of dynamic? I ask. We could find a bigger house, Haley explains enthusiastically, where everyone would have their own space, their own independence. You could have a separate wing, your own bathroom, even a separate entrance if you want. A separate wing. How generous of them to give me a separate wing in the house that I will be financing. That sounds expensive, I remark. Well, of course it will require an investment. Haley agrees. But think of the benefits. You won't be alone in this big house, and we'll be able to take care of you when you need it. Take care of me. The woman who demanded my eviction a month ago is now offering care. And what will you get in return? I ask. A family, David replies quickly. The opportunity to be close to you, to learn from you, to share your life. And financial assistance, I add. Mom, if you can help us, we'll be grateful, David admits. But that's not the main thing. The main thing is that we want to correct our mistake. To correct our mistake. What a noble motivation, especially when backed by the prospect of access to millions. Rosalind, imagine, Haley says dreamily, a big house in a prestigious neighborhood where we all live in harmony. We could have children, and you would be a wonderful grandmother. We could travel together, entertain guests, live a full family life. Children, travel, family life. Haley paints an idyllic picture where I play the role of the wealthy patron of their happiness. What if I refuse? I ask. Then we'll be very upset, David replies sadly. But we'll understand. We have no right to demand your forgiveness after what we've done. No right to demand. How modest and noble. But I see in their eyes the desperation of people who have missed out on a gold mine and are now trying to get it back. Do you know the size of my inheritance? I asked directly. David said it was a significant amount, Haley replies cautiously. But that's not what's important to us. What's important is restoring family ties. Restoring family ties. What a beautiful phrase for blatant greed. $15.5 million, I say calmly. Haley almost falls off the couch. David opens his mouth but can't say a word. Apparently, they were expecting to hear a much smaller amount. 15, Haley repeats in a weak voice. Million? And a half, I confirm, plus a business in California that brings in a steady income. My God, David whispers. Mom, you're a multimillionaire. Yes, I nod. That's right. They sit in a daze, digesting the information. I can see their minds quickly calculating possibilities, making plans, envisioning a life of luxury. Rosalind, Haley finally finds her voice. Now I regret our conflict even more. We could have been such a happy family. A happy family. With my money, their happiness would indeed be boundless. Mom, please give us a chance to make amends, David pleads. We'll do anything to make you happy. Anything to make me happy and to keep my money in the family. I'll think about your offer, I say neutrally. It's a serious decision. Of course, Haley agrees. Take your time, but know that we are willing to accept any conditions as long as you give us the opportunity to make amends. Any conditions. Interesting wording. I wonder if they will still be willing if my conditions turn out to be different from what they expect. While we wait for your decision, Haley continues, maybe we could meet up sometimes, just to reconnect, to show that we've changed. Meet up to show that we've changed, or to make sure I don't change my mind about the money. Maybe, I reply. We'll see. They spend another hour at my place, admiring the house, asking about my plans, delicately hinting at their financial needs. David talks about how hard it is for them to live on his salary as a furniture assembler. Haley mentions her dream of opening her own dental practice, but she needs startup capital for that. When they finally get ready to leave, Haley hugs me with ostentatious warmth. Rosalind, thank you for listening to us, she says. I'm so glad we have a chance to make things right. Mom, I love you, David adds, kissing me on the cheek. Whatever happens, remember that. He loves me. How convenient to remember love when $15 million is at stake. After they leave, I sit in the living room surrounded by the gifts they brought and reflect on what has happened. White roses in a crystal vase, expensive chocolate, French champagne, symbols of remorse and hope for forgiveness, or bribes for access to the inheritance. The phone rings. David's number is on the display. Mom, thanks again for taking us in, he says. I want to believe that everything will work out for us. We'll see, David, I reply. Time will tell. Mom, can I ask you a question? He continues. Have you decided how you're going to dispose of the inheritance? Do you have any plans? Plans for disposing of the inheritance. Of course, he's interested in the plans. I have a few ideas, I reply evasively, but nothing definite yet. I see, David's voice sounds disappointed. Just wanted to know, in case you need our advice or help. Their advice or help in spending $15 million. How thoughtful of them. Thanks for the offer, I say. I'll let you know if I need anything. After our conversation, I pour myself a glass of wine and go out onto the terrace. The evening air is fresh, and the last autumn chrysanthemums planted by Mr. Thompson are blooming in the garden. I think about how the people around me have changed with the arrival of money. David, who a month ago was shouting that he didn't need a poor mother, now swears his love. Haley, who demanded that I move out, is proposing a new family dynamic. But the most interesting thing is not that they have changed. The most interesting thing is that I can finally see their true faces. Money has not changed their character. It has simply revealed what was always hidden behind a mask of propriety. Greed, calculation, a willingness to use family ties for financial gain. I drink wine and enjoy my new power. The power of a person who can say yes or no, give or not give, forgive or not forgive. A month ago, I was a dependent old woman who could be thrown out onto the street with a single harsh word. Now they grovel before me with apologies and gifts. willing to suffer any humiliation for access to my millions. And you know what? I like it. I like seeing their fake smiles, hearing their false apologies, watching their desperate attempts to regain my favor. They deserve this lesson, and I'm going to teach it to them until the end. Over the next 2 weeks, David and Haley launch a full-scale campaign to win my favor. They call every other day, invite me to lunch, suggest we go shopping together. Every conversation invariably ends with subtle hints about their financial difficulties and dreams of a better life. On the first Monday in December, Haley comes to me with a proposal to go shopping together. "Rosalind, I saw some amazing Christmas decorations at the mall," she says enthusiastically. "Maybe we should go check them out. I'll show you some stores with beautiful clothes at the same time." We drive to the mall in my Rolls Royce. Haley admires the car, the leather seats, and the quiet engine the whole way there. In the store, she acts like an experienced consultant, showing me dresses, blouses, and jewelry. "This would look amazing on you," she says, showing me an expensive cashmere coat. "Such an elegant style, perfect for a woman of your status." A woman of my status. Interesting wording. A month ago, she didn't think I had any special status. "By the way," Haley continues, looking at the price tag on the coat, "I also need to update my wardrobe for winter. But with our income, it's difficult. David only makes $2,400 a month, and quality clothing is so expensive. The hint is clear. She wants me to buy her a coat or give her money to update her wardrobe." Yes, the prices are really high, I agree, ignoring the hint. Haley waits for me to continue, but I just keep looking at the merchandise. A few minutes later, she returns to the subject. "Rosalind, have you thought about helping David change jobs?" she asks. "He's very skilled with his hands. He could start his own business assembling and repairing furniture, but he needs startup capital for that." "How much does he need?" "Well, $50,000 would be enough to start with," Haley replies, as if we were talking about $50. Rent for a workshop, tools, initial advertising. $50,000. That's a lot of money for them, but pocket change for me. But the principle is more important than the amount. "Interesting idea," I say neutrally. "Did David discuss this with me?" "He's too shy to ask," Haley explains. "You know how modest he is. But I can see how he's struggling in this job, how he dreams of independence. Dreams of independence. With my money, of course." That evening, David calls. "Mom, how was your day with Haley?" he asks. "She said you had a great time." "Yes, it was nice," I reply. "Mom, did she mention my plans for my own business?" David continues, trying to sound casual. "She did," I confirm. "It's an interesting idea." "I've been thinking about it for a long time," David says enthusiastically. "Do you know how many people buy furniture and can't find a good craftsman to assemble it? I could offer a full range of services: delivery, assembly, minor repairs." "Sounds promising," I agree. "How do you plan to finance the startup?" "Well, I was thinking," David stammers, "maybe take out a bank loan or find an investor." An investor? What a delicate word for a rich mother. "Banks are reluctant to give loans to new businesses," I note. "It's too risky for them." "Yes, I know," David agrees sadly. "That's why I'm thinking about an investor, someone who believes in my abilities." "I see," I say. "Good luck finding someone like that." David clearly expected a different reaction. After a pause, he continues. "Mom, would you like to, maybe you'd be interested in—" "What exactly?" I ask, forcing him to state his request directly. "Invest in my business," David finally blurts out. "I'll pay you back with interest, I promise. I'll pay you back with interest." The son who called me a penniless burden a month ago is now asking for an investment. "David, this is a serious decision," I reply. "I need to think about it." Of course, of course. He quickly agrees. I'm not rushing you. Just know that this opportunity could change our lives. Our lives. He is already including me in his plans to spend my money. A few days later, they invite me to dinner at a restaurant. They choose an expensive place in the city center, order the best wine, and act like gracious hosts. Of course, I pay the bill. Rosalind, we're so happy that our relationship is improving, Haley says, raising a glass of wine. To family and new beginnings. To family, I repeat, sipping my wine. Mom, I wanted to talk to you about our plans. David begins. Haley and I have discussed our future a lot, and we have a few ideas. What are they? I ask. First, my business, David explains. I've already found a suitable space for a workshop, drawn up a business plan, and calculated the return on investment. Second, Haley continues, my dental practice. I've been working for Dr. Miller for 5 years and know all his clients. If I open my own clinic, many of them will switch to me. How much will it cost? I ask. 50,000 is enough for my business, David replies. Haley's clinic needs more, about 200,000. The equipment is expensive, and rent in a good area is also not cheap. $250,000 for the two of them. They've already calculated everything and divided up my money. So, what are you proposing? I ask. We could become partners, Haley suggests. You invest in our projects, and we share the profits. It's a win-win situation. Partners. They're offering me to become a partner in a business that I will finance and they will manage. Besides, David adds, we're thinking about buying a new house, something in the North Side area, with a large plot of land and a swimming pool. There are some great houses there for $400,000 to $500,000, a new house for $500,000. Now their appetites have reached 7 figures. Those are pretty ambitious plans, I remark. Ambitious but realistic, Haley assures me. With your support, we could build a real family empire. Imagine successful businesses, a beautiful home, a decent standard of living, a family empire with my money. How tempting for them. What do I get in return? I ask. A family, David replies without hesitation. Loving children who care about you. The opportunity to see your grandchildren grow up in prosperity and comfort. Grandchildren. Now they're using unborn children as an argument to get money. Besides, Haley adds, it's a smart investment. The business will be profitable. The house will increase in value. You won't be wasting your money, you'll be multiplying it. A smart investment. They present their wishes as a financial strategy. I need time to think, I say. Of course, David agrees, but know that we are willing to discuss any terms. The main thing for us is to restore family relations. Any terms. I wonder how broadly they interpret the word any. The next day, I invite them to my house for a serious conversation. David and Haley arrive with beaming faces, apparently hoping to hear my agreement to finance their plans. Sit down, I say, pointing to the sofa. I have something to tell you. They sit down next to each other, holding hands like children waiting for presents. I've thought about your proposals, I begin, and I've come to some conclusions about my finances. And, Haley asks hopefully, I've decided to spend most of my inheritance on myself and on charity, I announce calmly. Their faces change instantly. Their smiles disappear. Their eyes widen in shock. To charity? David repeats in a weak voice. Yes, I confirm. I plan to donate several million to orphanages, hospitals, and animal shelters. I'll spend the rest on travel, a comfortable life, and maybe buying a house in a warm climate. But Mom, David begins, what about the family? What about us? What about you? I ask innocently. You said that the most important thing for you was to restore family relationships, not money. Haley and David look at each other in confusion. Apparently, they didn't expect this turn of events. Of course, family relationships are the most important thing, Haley quickly agrees. But we hoped that you would help us build a future. I am helping you, I reply. I forgive your behavior and am willing to maintain a relationship. Isn't that enough? It's enough, David mumbles, but there is bitterness and disappointment in his voice. We just thought of other forms of help. What exactly? I insist. Financial support, Haley admits honestly. Rosalind, you have so much money and we have so few opportunities. Can't you share? Share, I repeat. Interesting word. What do I get in return? Our love and gratitude, David replies. Your love, I nod. The same love you showed when you kicked me out of the house a month ago? There is a heavy pause. David and Haley realize that their plans are falling apart. Mom, please, David pleads, give us at least a chance, just a little help to start with. A little help, I repeat. How much exactly? Well, at least 50,000, Haley asks, or 30 or 20, whatever amount you think is reasonable, any amount. Now they're bargaining like at a market. What if I don't give you anything? I ask. What then? David and Haley exchange glances again, and I see growing anger in their eyes. Then we'll be very disappointed, Haley says cautiously. But we'll try to understand your decision. Try to understand. How noble of them to try to understand why I don't want to finance their whims. Okay, I say, getting up from my chair. Then consider this my final decision. There will be no investment in your projects. David and Haley sit on the sofa, like two convicts who have just heard their sentence. Their dreams of easy money have evaporated, and now they will have to live on the salaries of a furniture assembler and a dental clinic administrator. Mom? David makes one last attempt. Maybe you'll reconsider. Don't rush into a final decision. I've been thinking about it for a whole month, I reply. That's enough. They leave my house silently, with their heads bowed and heavy hearts, and I remain in the living room, enjoying the sight of their disappointed faces. They have learned a lesson they will remember for a long time. Money does not forgive humiliation, and family relationships cannot be restored with apologies alone. After I refuse to finance their plans, David and Haley disappear from my life for 2 weeks. No calls, no visits, no attempts to contact me. I use this time wisely, planning charitable donations and studying travel brochures. On Wednesday evening, David calls in a formal tone. Mom, we need to meet, he says. We have questions about inheritance and family obligations. Come tomorrow at 7, I say. The next day, they show up in business suits with a folder of documents. Haley gets straight to the point. Rosalind, we've studied the law. David is entitled to a share of the inheritance as the only son. If you make a will that excludes him, he can challenge it in court. And what do you suggest? I ask. A compromise, Haley replies confidently. 10 million to David, 2 million to you for your living expenses, and the rest to charity. And if I refuse, then we will have to defend David's rights in court, Haley replies coldly. We have hired a lawyer. Your decision to give everything to charity could be interpreted as a sign of senile dementia. Mom, we're giving you one last chance to settle this amicably, David adds. All right, I say, standing up. I've made my decision. Tomorrow, I'm going to the notary and leaving all 15 million to charity organizations. David won't get a cent. Mom, you can't. David turns pale. I can and I will. What's more, tomorrow I'm buying a ticket for a cruise ship and going on a 3-month trip around the world. Rosalind, we can freeze your assets through the courts, Haley threatens. Try it. We'll see what the court says when it finds out how you treated me before I received my inheritance. They leave, slamming the door behind them. David shouts goodbye. You'll regret this, Mom. You'll be all alone. The next day, I draw up a new will at the notary's office. I leave all my property to three charities. To David, I leave only a note. To the son who called me a poor burden, I buy a ticket for a luxury cruise ship for $80,000. 3 months on the seas and oceans. On the morning of my departure, I call David to say goodbye. Mom, maybe we can find a compromise, he asks desperately. It's too late. The will has been changed, I reply and turn off the phone. On the liner, I get a luxurious cabin with panoramic windows. At dinner, I meet the other passengers. Everyone has their own story, but no one tries to find out the size of my account. A week later, my lawyer informs me that David and Haley have filed a lawsuit to have me declared incompetent. The trial is set for March. By that time, I will be in the Mediterranean Sea. A month later, Martha writes news from home. David and Haley are constantly arguing, accusing each other of losing the inheritance. The neighbors hear shouting. David came to my house and stood at the gate for a long time. In the 3rd month of the cruise, I receive news. The court has dismissed their lawsuit. My legal capacity was recognized as full, and the will was valid. The judge noted the plaintiff's mercenary motives. Standing on the deck of the liner, I look at the ocean and think about the past months. Somewhere in Fort Wayne, David and Haley receive the court's decision and realize that their plan has failed completely. And I will live as I please. Perhaps David was right. I will remain alone. But loneliness among sincere people is better than a family built on lies and greed. Victoria was right. Money does not change people, it reveals their true nature. Now I know who is worth what, and this knowledge is more valuable than any amount of money.